It was 1 in the morning when the pounding on my front door jolted me awake. At first, I thought it was nothing. Maybe a dream tugging at the edges of sleep, or the wind shaking the shutters. But the sound came again, louder this time, urgent, frantic, like fists made of desperation hammering against the wood. I froze under my blanket, my heart slamming against my ribs. Who would knock at such an hour? Neighbors didn't visit in the middle of the night, not in our quiet street. And family? No one had ever shown up unannounced after midnight. The sound came again. Bang, 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 a rhythm that carried fear in its echo. It wasn't the polite tap of someone hesitant. It wasn't even the angry pound of a stranger demanding attention. No, this was different. It was trembling, broken, a cry for help disguised as a knock. And in that moment, every instinct in me screamed, "Something is wrong." I pulled back the blanket and slid out of bed. The floor was ice beneath my bare feet, each step creaking as though the house itself was holding its breath. The night was heavy, the kind of silence that amplifies the smallest sounds. The tick of the clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the frantic pounding that refused to stop. As I reached the hallway, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the door's lock. My mind raced with possibilities. Could it be a stranger? A thief? Someone drunk or lost? But then I heard it. A voice. Faint. Breaking. Barely more than a whisper. "Mom." That single word sliced through me. I unlocked the door and swung it open, and in that instant, my world shifted forever. There she was, my daughter, my beautiful girl, pale as the moonlight, her hair clinging to her damp forehead, her body trembling as though every ounce of strength had already been spent. She clutched at me silently, her knees buckled, and before I could cry out, she collapsed forward into my arms. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. The weight of her against me was overwhelming. Not just her body, but the unspoken pain, the silent scream carried in her limp form. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath a battle. I brushed her hair back from her face, searching her eyes for answers, but all I found was fear. Fear so deep it seemed to have carved itself into her bones. "What happened?" I whispered, though part of me was terrified of the answer. She didn't respond. Her lips parted, then closed. A sob slipped through, muffled by the hand she pressed to her mouth. And then silence. That silence was louder than the pounding on the door, louder than the questions screaming in my head. It was the silence of secrets too heavy to carry, the silence of suffering endured alone. As I sat beside her, my mind spun with memories, fragments of moments that suddenly took on new meaning. The way her laughter had dimmed over the months, the phone calls she cut short when he was near, the long sleeves she wore even in the summer heat. And then the thought that chilled my blood. Where was her husband? Why wasn't he the one here, holding her, protecting her, bringing her to safety? Why did she come to me in the dead of night, broken and trembling? A mother's instinct is rarely wrong, and in that moment, though she hadn't yet spoken the truth, I knew in my bones that he had something to do with this. I reached for her hand, holding it tightly as though my grip alone could anchor her back to safety. She flinched, just barely, but enough for me to notice. And that tiny movement screamed louder than words. She's been hurt. She's been hurt badly. I wanted to rage, to scream, to demand answers, but I didn't. I couldn't. Right now, she didn't need questions. She needed safety. She needed her mother. So, I whispered instead, "You're safe now, sweetheart. You're home." And as her tears soaked into my shoulder, I felt the storm I had tried to ignore for so long finally break open inside me. That night, as the clock ticked past 2 in the morning, I sat by her side and held her hand, watching her fragile chest rise and fall. And though she didn't speak, though the truth remained locked behind trembling lips, I knew deep down this was only the beginning. The knock at 1 a.m. wasn't just a plea for help. It was the collapse of everything we thought we knew. It was the moment the mask cracked. It was the night that changed everything. Looking back now, I realized the truth was never hidden. It was always there, etched in the smallest details, like cracks spreading across glass. They weren't earthquakes, not at first, not the kind that made the house shake and walls crumble. No, they were hairline fractures, so faint, so easy to dismiss if you didn't want to see them. And oh, how badly I didn't want to see them. The story of those cracks began the day she brought him home. I remember it vividly. Her smile, wide and unguarded, the kind she hadn't worn since she was a child. Her eyes sparkled with that unmistakable glow, the light of someone who believes they found there forever. She was radiant, and he played the part perfectly. Charming, polite, attentive. He shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, and complimented the house. He laughed at her jokes, leaned in when she spoke, and even helped carry in the groceries without being asked. The kind of man who seemed too good to be true. And maybe that should have been my first warning. Mothers see things others can't. We sense undercurrents, subtle shadows, the way a smile can feel stretched too tight. And from the very beginning, something about him unsettled me. His words were smooth, but his eyes were calculating, like someone rehearsing a role. Still, I silenced that voice inside me. Don't be paranoid, I told myself. Of course you're protective. She's your only daughter. You'd find flaws in anyone she brought home. So I smiled and welcomed him into our family. The wedding came soon after. She looked breathtaking in her gown, her joy so radiant it filled the room. And I, wanting nothing more than her happiness, allowed myself to believe. I pushed aside my doubts, clung to the image of her glowing face, and convinced myself that my unease was nothing but the overprotectiveness of a mother who didn't want to let go. But happiness can be a mask, and beneath that mask, the cracks were already forming. I remember the first one as clearly as if it happened yesterday, a family dinner. The table filled with laughter, stories, the clinking of silverware. He was charming, telling jokes that had everyone in stitches. But then, when she reached for the salt, his hand clamped over hers. Just for a moment, just long enough for me to notice the sharp look in his eyes, a silent warning she seemed to understand all too well. Then, just as quickly, he released her hand, laughed, and continued his story as though nothing had happened. It was so small, so fleeting, I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. But the way her smile faltered, the way her eyes flickered down to her plate, it was real. Another crack appeared not long after. She began wearing long sleeves. At first, I brushed it off. Fashion, modesty, maybe even a new trend. But it was summer. The kind of heat that made even the thought of sleeves unbearable. And yet, there she was, tugging the cuffs down over her wrists like armor. "Isn't it too warm for that?" I asked once, trying to keep my voice light. She laughed, a laugh too quick, too rehearsed. "Oh, Mom, you know me. I'm always cold." But I didn't believe her. Not really. I saw the way she avoided rolling up her sleeves. the way her laughter didn't quite reach her eyes. Then there were the phone calls. At first, she'd call me every other day, just to chat. But over time, her voice became distant, short, rehearsed. Sometimes he answered instead. He's resting, or she's busy, as though her voice, her time belonged to him. And when she did get on the phone, I could hear the hesitation in her tone, the way she chose her words carefully, as if someone was always listening. One evening, she came over for tea. I remember the way her fingers wrapped tightly around the mug, as though the warmth was the only thing keeping her steady. She tried to tell me how stressed he was at work, how she was trying to support him, how marriage was just an adjustment. But her voice cracked at the edges. I reached across the table, squeezed her hand, and asked the question I had been too afraid to put into words. "Sweetheart, are you happy?" She smiled, but it wasn't real. Her lips curved upward, but her eyes begged me not to press further. And I didn't. That is the part that haunts me most now. The moment I had the chance to peel back the mask, to see the truth beneath, and I chose comfort over confrontation. I told myself I was respecting her privacy, her independence, but in truth, I was afraid of what I might discover. So I let it go, and the cracks deepened. I saw her flinch when doors slammed too hard. I saw her shrink when he raised his voice, even if it was only at the television. I saw her force laughter at jokes that cut too close, jokes made at her expense, jokes that made others laugh but made her smaller. The biggest crack, the one that should have shattered the entire facade, came one evening when she arrived for dinner alone. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. As we ate, I noticed her hands trembling around the fork, the way her gaze darted to the window as if expecting someone to appear. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Darling," I asked gently, "is everything okay at home?" She hesitated, then in a whisper so soft I almost missed it, she said, "Mom, it's complicated." And then she changed the subject. That was it. That was all she gave me, and instead of grabbing that thread and pulling, I let it slip through my fingers. Because the truth is, I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to hold on to the illusion that she was happy, that the man she had chosen was good, and that my instincts had been wrong all along. But deep down, I knew. Mothers always know. Each of those moments was a message, a warning etched into the silence. But I looked away, convincing myself that everything was fine, that the house was still standing even as the foundation beneath it was crumbling. And it crumbled, it did. At 1 a.m., when the pounding on my door split open the night, when she collapsed into my arms, broken and trembling, when the cracks I had ignored became a gaping chasm that swallowed us both. The truth is, the signs had always been there. I just chose not to see them. And that choice, the choice to look away, is the guilt I carry still. Nights have a way of holding secrets. In the daylight, everything looks normal, safe even. But at night, the world strips away its disguises. It was just past 1 a.m. when the pounding on my door ripped me from sleep. At first, I thought I had dreamed it. The house was so still, the kind of silence that blankets everything in a fragile calm. But then, again, 3 sharp, desperate knocks. Bang, bang, bang. My heart stuttered. Who could it be at this hour? I pulled on my robe and hurried to the door, fear and confusion tangled in my chest. When I opened it, the sight before me nearly brought me to my knees. It was my daughter. But not the daughter I knew. Not the bright, vibrant girl who used to dance around the kitchen or call me every morning just to say hello. No, this was a ghost of her. Her face was swollen, streaked with tears. Her lip was split, her hair tangled, her hands shaking violently. And then, before I could even form a word, she collapsed into my arms. "Mom," she whispered, her voice broken, hoarse. He did this." Her body shook against mine, every sob rattling my bones. I held her as tightly as I could, my robe soaking with her tears, my mind reeling with disbelief and fury. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm out into the night, find him, and tear him apart with my bare hands. But in that moment, all I could do was lower us both onto the floor, my hands cradling her face, whispering over and over, "You're safe now. You're safe. He can't touch you here." But even as I said the words, I wasn't sure if I believed them. Her arms clung to me like a child afraid of monsters, except this monster wasn't hiding under her bed. He was her husband. For what felt like hours, she cried into my chest, her words spilling out in broken fragments. "He pushed me, called me names, said I was worthless. I tried to fight back, but..." Her voice cracked, her breath hitching. She couldn't finish. And I couldn't stop the rage rising inside me. How dare he? How dare he put his hands on my child, my precious girl, the very soul I had carried into this world? But rage wouldn't stop her bleeding lip. It wouldn't calm the tremors racking her body. So I swallowed it down. For her. "We're going to the hospital," I said firmly, "right now." She shook her head wildly. "No, Mom, please. If we go, he'll know. He'll come after me. I cupped her cheeks, forcing her to meet my eyes. "Sweetheart, listen to me. He already came after you. He already did this. And if we don't act now, what's to stop him from doing worse next time? We're going. End of discussion." For a moment, I thought she'd resist, but then she slumped forward, too exhausted to argue. I grabbed my keys, wrapped her in a blanket, and guided her to the car. The drive to the hospital was silent, save for her quiet sobs. The road stretched endlessly, every red light an eternity. Every shadow outside reminded me of the man I wanted to strangle with my bare hands. When we arrived, the nurses rushed her inside. Bright lights, sterile walls, the smell of antiseptic. Everything felt surreal, like I was moving through someone else's nightmare. They took her to a room and began their questions. Did she feel safe at home? Who did this to her? Did she want to file a report? Her eyes darted to mine, wide and terrified. She shook her head. "No, police. Please, not yet." It broke me. That look, that fear, the way she still felt bound to him, even here, even after he had left her bruised and broken. But I respected her wishes for now. The doctors examined her. Bruises along her arms, a hairline fracture in her wrist, cuts across her shoulder, none life-threatening, thank God, but enough to prove what he was. Enough to etch this night into my memory forever. As I watched them tend to her, 1,000 images flashed through my mind, the long sleeves, the trembling hands, the whispers of, "Mom, it's complicated," all the cracks I had ignored. And now here she was, shattered. At one point, she turned her head toward me, her eyes red and raw. "Why didn't you stop me, Mom? Why didn't you tell me not to marry him? You knew, didn't you? You saw. Her voice trailed off, but I heard the accusation anyway. I swallowed hard. Because I wanted to believe you were happy. Because I thought love could fix anything. Because I was a coward. Her tears fell harder then, and I held her hand tightly, silently promising her, and myself, that I would never look away again. Hours passed. By morning, she was bandaged, medicated, resting. I sat in the corner of her room, staring at her fragile frame under the thin hospital blanket, rage still burning like wildfire inside me. I knew what came next wouldn't be easy. Divorce, confrontations, maybe even court battles. But as I watched her sleep, one thought crystallized in my mind. This was war. He thought he could break her, silence her, own her. But he had underestimated one thing. She wasn't alone. She had me. And if he thought he had seen the worst of me, he was wrong. Because that night, the night everything broke, was also the night I rose. I rose with the fury of a mother whose child had been hurt, with the strength of every sleepless night I had ever spent worrying, every sacrifice I had ever made. The mask had fallen, the truth was out, and I would burn the world to ashes before I let him lay another hand on her. That was the night our lives changed forever. The night I stopped being just a mother and became a warrior. Morning sunlight streamed weakly through the hospital blinds, casting thin stripes of gold across the white sheets where my daughter lay resting. For a fleeting moment, it looked almost peaceful, her breathing even, her face calmer than it had been just hours earlier. But I knew the truth. Peace was an illusion. Outside that room, a storm was gathering. The first crack of thunder came when the rest of the family arrived. My sister rushed in, her face pale with shock, her eyes darting between the bandages on her daughter's wrist and the swelling on her lip. She gasped, hands covering her mouth. "Oh my God, what happened?" I opened my mouth, but my daughter shook her head quickly. Her eyes begged me, "Not yet, not with everyone here." "She had a fall," I said stiffly, hating myself for the lie even as I spoke it. But not everyone was convinced. My sister narrowed her eyes, but she said nothing. She just sat beside the bed and stroked my daughter's hair, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. It didn't take long for word to spread. By the afternoon, the hospital room was filled with hushed voices, tense shoulders, and sideways glances. And then, inevitably, someone mentioned his name. "Where is he?" my brother demanded, his voice thick with anger. "Why isn't he here explaining himself?" The question hung heavy in the air. My daughter flinched at the sound of his name, her body curling inward as though the very mention of it burned her skin. "He's not coming," I said flatly. But the truth was he had called. He had left a voicemail on my phone, his voice sickly sweet, dripping with practiced innocence. "Listen, this has all been a misunderstanding. She overreacted and, well, you know how emotional she can be sometimes. I think it's best if we all calm down and talk this through like adults. Don't make this bigger than it is." Bigger than it is. My fists clenched even now, remembering. My daughter was lying in a hospital bed, broken and bruised, and he had the audacity to reduce it to an overreaction. When I played the voicemail aloud for the family, the room erupted. "He's lying," my brother spat. "He always seemed off to me," my cousin muttered. But then, like poison seeping into clean water, another voice cut through the tension. My daughter's aunt, his relative by marriage, crossed her arms. "Well, we don't know the full story. Maybe she did exaggerate. Maybe it was just an argument that got out of hand. Relationships are complicated." I will never forget the way my daughter's face fell at those words, as though she had been betrayed all over again. "She's sitting right here," I snapped, my voice sharp enough to make everyone freeze. Look at her! Look at what he did to her! And you dare stand there and defend him?" The room went silent, but the damage was done. The fracture had begun. Some stood firmly on her side, their anger blazing as hot as mine. Others whispered doubt, clung to excuses, or quietly stepped back into the shadows, unwilling to choose a side. And worst of all, there were those who defended him. "You don't know what goes on in a marriage," one relative murmured. "Maybe she provoked him," another suggested, too cowardly to say it directly to her face. Each word was a dagger. My daughter's hands trembled beneath the blanket, her eyes filling with fresh tears. I reached for her, held her tightly, and whispered, "Don't you listen to them. I know the truth. I saw it." But the fallout was spreading, unstoppable. Later that night, when the visitors had gone and the room was quiet again, she turned to me, her voice breaking. "Mom, why are they defending him? Why can't they see?" I brushed her hair back from her forehead, trying to steady my voice. "Because the truth is ugly, sweetheart, and people would rather protect their comfort than face it. Believing him is easier than admitting they were wrong about him all along. Easier than admitting they ignored the signs, just like I did." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It feels like I'm losing everyone." "No," I whispered fiercely. "You have me. You will always have me. And anyone who can't stand by you now doesn't deserve to stand by you at all." But inside, my heart ached. Because I knew she was right. The family was divided like a fault line after an earthquake, splitting us into two camps, those who believed her and those who chose to believe him. And the worst part? He fed it. He called relatives, spinning his story with the charm that had fooled us all once before. He painted her as unstable, emotional, and dramatic. He sowed seeds of doubt, just as abusers always do. And some, shamefully, believed him. One evening, a cousin called me. His voice was cautious, almost apologetic. I don't know what to think. He sounded so sincere when he said he attacked him first, said he was only defending himself. My hands shook with fury. Defending himself? Against a woman half his size? Does that sound believable to you? The cousin hesitated. I guess not. But still, it's their marriage. Shouldn't we stay out of it? Stay out of it? As though staying out of it would heal her fractured wrist, as though silence would erase the bruises. I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. But in my heart, I knew silence was complicity. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. The hospital became both a refuge and prison. Refuge because within those walls, at least he couldn't touch her. Prison because every visitor carried the weight of judgment, of whispers, of choosing sides. Even within my own family, the lines were drawn. My brother threatened to confront him directly. My sister begged for patience, worried about making things worse. And then there were the cowards, the ones who avoided us altogether, too afraid to commit to either side. But I committed. With every fiber of my being, I committed. "You listen to me," I told my daughter one night, my hand gripping hers. "This family may be divided, friends may vanish, people may disappoint you, but I will not. I will fight for you no matter what it takes." He thinks he's won, but he hasn't, because he doesn't realize who he's up against. He doesn't realize he's not just fighting you, he's fighting me, too. Her tears slowed just a little, and she whispered, "Thank you, Mom." And in that moment, I swore it that even if the whole world turned against her, she would never stand alone. Because yes, the family was divided. Loyalties were tested, but I had chosen my side, and I would never, ever switch. The fallout had begun. The battle lines were drawn, and though we had lost allies, we had gained something stronger: resolve. I didn't know it then, but the darkest revelation was still to come. A secret buried beneath all the lies and bruises, waiting to shatter what little remained of our fragile world. And when it came, it would change everything.
There are moments in life when the ground beneath you gives way, not because you slipped, but because someone you trusted took a hammer to the foundation. I thought I had already seen the worst. My daughter bruised, broken, and sobbing in my arms, the family split down the middle, some rallying behind her, others siding with her abuser. I thought nothing could be more painful than watching her suffer while people whispered excuses for the man who had done it. I was wrong. The darkest truth was yet to come. It began with a phone call. Late afternoon, the sun low in the sky, painting everything in that eerie golden glow that makes the world look almost too beautiful to be real. My phone rang, his name flashing across the screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something in me, curiosity, anger, maybe even masochism, made me swipe to answer. His voice was calm. Too calm. "I think we should talk," he said smoothly. "You and me, face to face." My stomach nodded. Every instinct screamed to hang up, but a colder part of me, the part that needed to hear the lies straight from his mouth, agreed. We met at a quiet cafe, neutral ground. He arrived with that same polished smile, the same mask he had worn when he first charmed his way into our lives. But now, I could see the cracks in it, the twitch in his jaw, the shadows in his eyes. He started with apologies. Oh, how easily the words slid off his tongue. "I made mistakes. I lost my temper, but you have to understand. She pushes me. She knows how to get under my skin. It wasn't what it looked like." I let him speak, every word scraping against my nerves like sandpaper. Then finally, I cut him off. "You don't get to blame her. Not anymore. I've seen the truth. I've seen what you did." For a moment, the mask slipped. His eyes narrowed, his smile faded. Then he leaned in closer, his voice dropping low. "You don't know half of it." And that's when he told me the affair. Not just an affair, but one that had been going on for months with someone close, someone my daughter had trusted, one of her friends. He described it like it was nothing, like he was recounting the plot of a movie, not confessing to shattering a woman's life. He even smirked as he mentioned how easily he had convinced her friend to betray her. My hands shook beneath the table. I wanted to throw the coffee in his face. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat frozen, my breath caught in my throat, as the pieces clicked into place. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the way my daughter had once asked, in a trembling voice, "Mom, do you think he still loves me?" And now I know. He hadn't just broken her body, he had broken her spirit. He had twisted her reality until she doubted her own worth. But the darkest part wasn't even the affair itself. It was what he said next. "She'll never leave me," he said confidently, leaning back in his chair. "She can't. I've made sure of it. People already think she's unstable. If she tries to go to the police, who will they believe? Her or me?" The smugness in his voice made bile rise in my throat. That's when I realized this wasn't just abuse. This was control, manipulation, a carefully constructed prison where he was the jailer and she was the captive. And worse still, he enjoyed it. I left the cafe shaking, his words echoing in my head. But I didn't tell my daughter. Not yet.
She was still so fragile, so raw from everything that had already happened. I couldn't bear to pile this new weight onto her shoulders, not until she was strong enough to hear it. But secrets have a way of surfacing, whether we want them to or not.
It happened 2 weeks later. She had finally gathered the courage to go through his things, papers, messages, bank statements. She wanted to prepare for divorce, to sever the ties that still bound them. That's when she found the messages. Dozens of them. Between him and her friend, I found her sitting on the floor of her bedroom, the phone clutched in her trembling hands, her face ghost white. "Mom," she whispered, her voice hollow. "Look." I took the phone, read the words, saw the photos, saw the cruel, mocking tone they used when they spoke about her. And in that moment, I saw my daughter's heart break all over again. She wasn't just betrayed by him. She was betrayed by someone she had trusted, someone who should have stood by her side. The room spun around me as I tried to hold her together. She sobbed into my chest, broken sounds that no mother should ever have to hear from her child. How could they? How could she? I didn't have an answer. All I could do was hold her tighter and whisper, "This isn't about you. This is about them. Their weakness, their cruelty, their betrayal. It doesn't define you. It defines them." But even as I said it, the rage inside me grew. Rage at him, rage at the so-called friend, rage at myself for not seeing it sooner. That night, as my daughter cried herself to sleep, I sat awake, staring into the darkness, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The battle wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about justice. He had broken her bones. He had shattered her trust. And now, with this betrayal, he had tried to destroy her completely. But he underestimated something far more powerful than his lies, his fists, or his manipulation. He underestimated the strength of a mother's love, and I swore with every breath in my body that I would make him regret it. The darkest truth had been revealed, but it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of his downfall. Healing didn't happen overnight. My daughter didn't wake up one morning and suddenly feel whole again. No, healing came in small, stubborn steps. The first was safety. She changed the locks, drew new boundaries, and finally realized she didn't owe him her silence. The second was voice. She spoke, first to me, then to others, and with every word, his power over her shrank. The third was justice. She stood in court, trembling but unbroken, and told her story. And when the gavel came down in her favor, it wasn't just a legal victory. It was proof that she was no longer powerless. And slowly, she rebuilt. The bruises faded. The nightmares grew less frequent. Her laughter returned, not forced, not hollow, but real. And the day she told me, "Mom, I'm learning to trust myself again," I knew she was finally stepping out of the shadows he had cast. But the greatest healing wasn't just hers. It was mine, too, because as a mother, I learned something through her pain. That silence is a prison, that abuse thrives in the dark, that loyalty should never be blind. And most of all, I learned that strength runs deeper than fear. So, if you're listening to this story, here's what I want you to carry with you. No matter how broken you feel, you are not what was done to you. You are not defined by betrayal, bruises, or silence. You are defined by what you choose next. Choose to speak. Choose to stand. Choose to believe that your life is worth more than the lies someone tried to make you believe. Because survival is not weakness. Survival is proof of strength. And strength, once found, cannot be taken away. my daughter is no longer the woman who collapsed at my door that night. She is standing tall, scars and all, stronger than she's ever been. And to me, that's the real ending of this story. Not what he did, but what she became. A survivor, a warrior, a living reminder that even in the darkest nights, healing is possible.